Hi there folks, this is the second part of my tutorial on how to paint trees in watercolour. In the first tutorial we had a look at where trees sit in the landscape, their role within the landscape, in the background, in the middle distance, in the foreground, and how to treat them and paint them differently depending on their position, and that's very, very important and solves a lot of problems, because one of the problems that I experience when I paint trees, and I know that others share this as well, there's a propensity to become too busy with what you're doing. Too much information goes into the wrong parts of the painting. And being able to separate trees out into those positions is very, very useful. So have a look if you haven't seen that video. I think you'll find that there's some help there with that particular problem. For this part of the tutorial though, let's start to have a look in a bit more detail at tree structure, how that varies throughout the year, throughout the seasons. We'll look at a couple of different types, or groups I should say, deciduous trees and evergreen trees. And there's a huge amount of content that I could make around this subject, in fact far too much for this one tutorial. So what I'm going to give you is the basics and what I consider to be the most important skills, and hopefully that will help you to hone your skills too when you paint trees in watercolour.
Well, I'm down in the valley now. You can see the railway viaduct behind me. It's a stunning structure, isn't it? A magnificent piece of architecture. Very, very difficult to draw, incidentally. All those arches, getting the perspective right and the uniformity, not easy at all. I'm not too concerned about that today, because what I'm here to have a look at is this lovely copse of oak trees up on the left. They caught my eye because at this time of the year, they're almost perfect for us to use as an exercise, I think, back in the studio when we look at the structure of a tree. You can see there's just a few leaves left. I think they'll probably be there maybe a week at most. All we need is a couple of moderate winds, and I think most of that will come down. But there's enough there to give the tree some definition, and more importantly, it gives us those apertures or little windows through which we can see the landscape beyond. And I find that really, really useful in a landscape painting. So I think these are ideal. I'm going to take a couple of shots, going to make a couple of sketches, and let's see how they turn out. I think they're going to be perfect actually for an exercise later. And look, there we are. There's the Brighton service going past. It's not going to make it into my sketch, but it's just nice to see it all the same.
Now I'm back in the studio. Let's just have a look at that gorgeous copse of trees by the viaduct that I saw earlier. What I've done is I've drawn it out here. I've left the viaduct out. There's no need to put that in at this stage. It's just a bit of extra detail. I'm not making a finished painting of this image here, but I just want to show you how we deal with trees in a bit more detail, in particular so we can get to understand the structure of deciduous trees like this and how to paint them. Let's start off looking at trees in winter, purely because it's easier to see their structure. And the first thing to say, and this may sound rather obvious, is trees around. If you're standing in the field, you get the sense of three dimensions. You can see branches that are coming towards you. You can see branches that are moving away from you behind the tree. The difficulty is when we come to paint them, we don't have the luxury of three dimensions. We've simply got two on the paper here. And we need to find ways of conveying that. What I've done here is I've mixed up some colours. I've got some raw sienna and some burnt sienna, and some burnt sienna and ultramarine in here, and ultramarine and cadmium red as a shadow colour there. I've then got my sticky mixes here, which are again the same colours, just in different concentrations. The second thing that you'll notice, and this is another really important issue with regard to trees and their shapes and their structures, it's that they're not uniform. So let's get some colour on the paper, and I'm going to paint this in the same way that I looked at painting trees in the previous exercise. I'm going to put shapes down on the paper roughly where the leaves and the twigs are growing. I'm using broken brush strokes, keeping my brush on the side like this, dragging it across the paper quickly. Then I'm going to go into a slightly darker colour here because the sun is coming from this side of the tree, albeit it's quite light. And I'm keeping an eye on where I want there to be gaps within the painting. And the first thing to point out here is that in order to get this sense of roundness within the tree, you need to be painting this type of cover right across the tree, because the branches that are growing towards you, they're covered by leaves just as much as ones are around the perimeter of the tree. So it's really important to keep that in mind. That's fine for the time being. Now I'm just going to get a damp brush and just soften off some edges in various places here. Not everywhere, but it just helps to break up some of these outlines. That's it. And then I'm going to get my rigger brush and start to paint at the top here, because it's drying out quicker at the top of the paper. And the branches here are all fairly dark, so let's get those in quickly. Let them run up into the paint that we've put down on the paper. And what we've got here is that lovely effect that we saw in the previous tutorial, where branches are running into areas of wet foliage. It's merging together. It's looking as though some of the tree is covered, some of it is in the open, its leaves have been lost. I could probably use a larger brush here, to be honest, but as I demonstrated previously, let's go down, work down the paper with a thicker brush like this. And I just point out that and now you see I'm into these branches that are jumping forward at us. They're coming out of this area of leaves, and you can see that they're slightly odd shapes, and that's because we're not looking at them from a side profile, if you like. They are coming towards us, and it's the same with ones that go behind the tree as well. You have to imagine them growing in slightly different shapes as well. Here we have some more just coming across here, again falling down across the other trees behind it. There we are, that's good enough. As we looked at last time, make sure that you anchor your tree down into the landscape. So I'm just going to put a little bit of blue into the raw sienna here. Let's get a nice green colour. It's very green actually in the scene. I'm just going to drop a little bit of hooker's green in there just to liven it up a bit. There's probably too much moisture at the bottom of the trunk there, so let's just take that out. I'm not going to paint right up to the top there, because I can come down over the top of this when I'm putting in those other larger trees. Now, as this is starting to dry up, the other thing to bear in mind is to remember that the trunks, the branches themselves are round. It's not just the tree that's round. All the limbs are, as you know, when you cut through and you look at those lovely rings that you get within a tree, that's what a tree trunk and a tree branch is like. The danger is, with side light coming from this direction, that it just looks flat. So as this is drying up, you can touch the side of the tree here with a darker mix and allow that to run together. And all of a sudden you've got light falling on this side of the tree and you've got shadow on this side. Also, some of these branches in here are likely to be a little bit darker, a little bit hidden by leaves, obscured by other branches. And just drop it in where you think it needs to go. Under here, I think, would be dark as well. Now in here is a rather nice, I say it's rather nice, it's ivy that's growing up the tree, and of course it's not doing the tree any good, it's choking it, but it looks quite nice because it's dark and it's growing up there. Just adds a little bit of variation, a little bit of texture. And we've got the same that's growing up through here too. And I'm going to use a larger brush for this. Just let that all run into there. Remember, trees are not uniform. And just remember, uniformity in a tree just chokes it of any sense of realism whatsoever. Even though they do conform to understandable patterns to an extent, you've just got to keep in mind that they are not uniform. Let's put a little fence post in there, why not? Always good. Down in this corner, let's put in a little bit of hedgerow here that's just growing up underneath the tree. That should just merge into there. It's just about damp enough. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. You know, it's nothing serious. It's just a suggestion of hedgerow, and of course we've got another fence post in there. Yeah. Now this tree in the middle here, I'm not 100% sure if it is an oak tree, to be honest. It may be a beech tree, but I'm going to paint it differently. And what I'm going to do is almost entirely paint that structure, and then I'm going to use a technique of dry brushing over the top of that once it's dry, to suggest the leaves and the small twigs that lie around the perimeter of the branches as we look at it from this angle, but also to cover the branches like this one here that are growing towards us, like these ones that are growing away from us, and you'll see how that helps to give it a three-dimensional quality. Now, trees like this can be quite difficult to paint in as much as there's a lot going on there, and to an extent everything is sort of coming back to the main trunk in terms of the way you paint it. And what you don't want to do is paint little bits and allow them to dry and then paint another little bit and try and sort of merge them together. That never looks quite right, and you end up having sort of overlapping edges which just doesn't particularly look good. So what I like to do is, as much as possible, to put a lot of juicy colour. This is yellow ochre, French ultramarine, a little bit of burnt sienna in there as well. I try to get the main trunk established with as much colour and the main limbs out of it. And you need this to be really wet because you want to be able to keep painting away from it with your smaller branches and to be able to pick up the fact that it's wet. So that, I think, is enough. Now I'll go to the rigger, and I'm going to use a slightly darker colour here because some of these branches are starting to look darker, and I'm using that stroke that I showed you in the previous tutorial, which is to paint with the side of the rigger pressed into the paper and then ease off as branches become thinner and more tapered the further they extend from the main trunk. And keep an eye on all these areas that you have left that are wet and have got more branches coming out of them. Keep working into them so you've always got something fresh that you can paint back into without it drying. I'm not going to take quite as much care over this as I would do if I was doing a studio painting or a painting for one of my galleries or something like that, but it's enough to give you an indication of how I'm going to create a sense of 3 dimensions using this particular technique. That's getting a bit dry there, but I can keep coming back down that trunk, or that branch I should say, until I can connect with the damp paint, and it won't really show too much. It's fine to do that because it's the trunk of a tree, it's covered in bark, it's got texture, and to have a few little gnarly bits where paint may have dried a little bit and you reinvigorate them with the brush, that's okay. It just gives a little bit of character, a little bit of texture to the tree. Now we've got this nice branch here it's coming out from the main trunk here, it's coming across, and then it's got this lovely shape here, and the reason it looks like that is because it's coming towards us. If we looked at this from the side, it would probably look reasonably straight, but as we're looking at it in a foreshortened way, it's twisting around, it's doing all manner of things. And we've got another one here, it's coming down like this, and you get these nice angles. You've got to put things like this in your trees, otherwise they just do look like you cut through the middle of them. I'll show you an example of that in a minute. I'm just putting a few more smaller branches in here. There's one there. Again, this is growing towards me, so it's going up, down, it's going all over the place. You'll notice actually on both of these trees, interestingly enough, that most of the foliage is on the right hand side of them as we look at them, and that's because that's facing south, and that's often the case with trees. They tend to grow towards the majority or towards the light, which in the UK for most of the day is in the south, if it's there at all. And also they tend to grow away from prevailing wind if they're in a windy location, although that's not the case here. Now I'm just going into my shadow colour of ultramarine and cadmium red, and I'm having a look at some of the dark areas around here. It's gorgeous and dark, and it's in a bit of shadow, so I'm going to drop some colour in there. And all of a sudden we're starting to get something that's coming to life. It's not simply a flat shape on the paper. It's got areas that are dark, it's got areas that are lighter. Things are coming towards us. We've got things going away from us as well. And that one there you can see has gone behind the branch in front of it. And so that sense of overlapping elements within the tree really help to create a sense of 3 dimensions. I'm keeping an eye on the fact that this side should also be in shadow as well. That'll do, I think, for the time being. There's a couple of smaller branches that I haven't put in yet, but that can be done in due course. And now let's just put a little bit more work over the top here. Just a glaze, and it allows me to pick up the bottom of that tree there and merge that into the landscape. Lovely. Let's just put a little bit of hedge detail in there as well while that's wet, so that it can all run together. Now as that's just drying up, I think I'm going to put in the tree behind it as well, but it is behind it, so I'm not going to put it in quite so much detail or with quite such strong colours. So let's just get something established in there. Back to the rigger brush for some darker branches and a little bit of shadow just on that side of the tree dropped in while it's wet. Often as well, you can't quite see it with these trees because they're hidden behind the hedge, but keep an eye for what's growing round the base of the trees. Often there's all manner of rubbish and twigs and grasses and things like that that grow around the bottom of trees, and that all helps to keep it anchored into the landscape. So look out for that. It's a nice thing to include in your paintings if you can. So with this particular tree here, I want to allow most of that structure to show through. So this is more wintry than it is autumnal, and the way that we deal with that mass of small twigs, a few little bits of leaves left at the ends of the branches, is to put some dry brushing over the top. But I just want to show you this because this is what it shouldn't look like. I've got 2 trees here that aren't quite right. This one doesn't look too bad. It's not a bad shape as such, but the way that I've put the dry brushing onto the edge of these branches is fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's just gone around the perimeter of the tree because that's where my branches finish. It ignores the fact that there will be branches growing towards me. There'll be branches growing away from me. And of course, they are also covered with small twigs and leaves as well. But because we can't really see them, or we have omitted to paint them in because they're not so obvious, and logically they don't quite fit with what we're doing, we miss them out. And so this just simply becomes a cross-section cut through the middle of the tree, and it doesn't look realistic. I did this little example here too as well, just to show you that you need to taper your branches. That's really, really important. If you spend time observing them, you'll see quite clearly that branches just get smaller as they grow further away from the trunk. So something like this that is coming out and getting thick as it goes towards the top, it just looks clumsy, it looks wrong, and it looks more, I don't know what it looks like. It looks more like a radio antennae or a rotary washing line or something. It doesn't look like a tree. And it may sound a simple thing, but taking care to observe things like tapering branches and branches growing towards you and growing away from you shows that you've understood the structure of the tree, that you've observed it correctly. And if you've done that, then of course you're going to have a far better chance of painting it accurately, or with a sense of realism at any rate. So that's something we need to avoid here. And what I've done is I've just put a little bit more paint down on the palette here. And I'm going to dry brush with the side of the brush. And I am going to go around the top to start with, because that sort of establishes the shape of the tree. And paint down the branches that you've painted. It helps to make sense of what you've already put down. And you can see it's looking quite nice. It's giving us that sense of fine branches on the edge. I'm just dampening my brush because I don't want hard edges everywhere. Finger again, useful to get into the paint and just mix things up a little bit. But now you see we have to keep going with this in the middle of the tree. There are branches growing towards us that are covered in these leaves. There's branches down here that are as well. Make sure you get something on that. And they fall over the trunk. Now on this side, of course, it's getting a little bit duller because we have some shade on this side. You've got to come over these branches and trunks and cover in some of these gaps. Leave some as well. Remember, you don't want uniformity. You want gaps here, no gaps there, leaf cover here, no leaf cover there. That's really, really important. But now we've got a sense that these small branches are growing everywhere. They're behind the tree, they're in front of the tree. Unlike here, where the foliage is denser, you can start to see the underpainting of the tree's structure that we put in first up. Now, while that's still damp, let's finish off the final tree. And there's my large brush, there it is. It's a little bit more green on this side, incidentally. So I'm just going to cheat a little bit and throw in a bit of Hooker's green. And we're going back to the style of painting that we did first time round. Change that colour up. Don't want it all looking the same. Bit of shadow colour. That's too thick, I think, to start off with, so that's better. Now, what I want to show you specifically with this area is, again, that we've got a lot of rubbish growing down at the bottom here. Ivy, I think, is in there. Lots of other small saplings, but some of it's catching the light. So I just want to sort of create a mass of sort of dark shapes in here. And then show you how we deal with a lighter trunk. And there's a number of techniques actually for doing that. I won't go into them in too much detail here because it might be worth having a look at my other video. I've put a link up here to it, which is called Highlights and Edges in Petworth, which was a painting I did of Petworth House. And in particular, it deals with this issue of when you're painting darker onto light all the time, how do you manage these areas of light amongst dark? Because it's not entirely straightforward. And you've got several strategies to do that. And that particular video is quite helpful, and it sets it out in a bit more detail. So I'm not going to go into lots of detail here, but I will just show you in this instance what I will do to achieve that. Let's put the darks in first. Because of course I could just paint around and leave gaps, but it just doesn't suit this style of painting. It becomes too difficult to do. So you need to find other strategies to help you do it. Some branches coming down there. Let's get some dark on that side of the trunk. Keep going with the hedge, just helps to finish things off quite nicely. Now, some of you have been kind enough to comment on my last video, and thank you for doing that. It's much appreciated. And one of the things in particular that comes up quite often is that I don't tell you what colours I'm using. And there's a reason for that, because I don't really know. I mean, I know that that's French ultramarine. I know that's raw sienna. I know that is burnt sienna. I know that's yellow ochre. I've got a bit of Payne's grey in here as well. I've already made those decisions before I'm going to paint, and I know, because I've used these for years and years, exactly what's going to happen when they all start running together like this. So I can't tell you really what colour I've used to paint this. It's how I paint. I love this swirling around of paint on the palette that's mixing colours for me and allowing me to go back in and pick up something that's slightly different than what I used previously. That's just how I paint. So that's why perhaps I don't always say, look, well, now you need to mix a little bit of French ultramarine with a little bit of cadmium red, and then we need to put in a little bit of raw sienna. I can do those videos, and we will do things like that in due course. But for the nature of this exercise, to me, it goes against the, how should I say, the intuitive way that I like to put paint down on the paper. And I'm not very good at these videos, and so trying to explain absolutely everything while I'm doing it is a bit of a nightmare, quite frankly. But we get by.
Now, many of you have been very kind and subscribed to the channel, and thanks very much for doing that. If you haven't, please click subscribe. If you enjoy the videos, if you enjoy the content, that would be really, really helpful. Also, as you watch these videos, please click on the thumbs up button if you like what you're watching, because all of these things are tremendously helpful for me in running the channel. More clicks on subscribe, more likes, more views, it all helps for me to keep making this content and bringing it to you. So thank you very much. Just thought I'd drop that in there, and let's get back to the painting.
Now there's some lighter trunks running up through here, and what I've got is a chisel brush, and I've just dampened it in the water, but I don't want too much water in there. This is still damp on the paper, and what I can do is just ease out some of the paint before it dries. And what's important is that you've got a tissue here, or kitchen paper I should say, that allows me to just clean that brush off when I take the paint out. Otherwise, I'm just going to be putting it back down on the paper. You can also do this when it's completely dry, but you have to sort of scrub a bit harder and blot out. But I just just want to take away some of the paint running up through there. That will do for now. And then once that's dry, I can put some shadow on the other side of that tree trunk that's lighter, and that it will stand forward from that sort of dark mass of ivy and trunks that's sitting behind it. So that's all dried up now. I can put a little bit of shadow on this side of the tree here, just to give it a bit of definition. Again, we've got branches coming forward. They're coming across this tree here in front of us. That's helping to further enhance that three-dimensional feel to the tree. I'm putting dark underneath this area here where this branch comes out, and then all of a sudden it's not hitting the light, and it's just becoming a branch that's darker and it's going across that other tree behind it. Again, we've got branches coming down. They'll come towards you like this. And that pretty much is how we deal with winter trees. And hopefully that's given you a good indication of the structure and the way that we can try to achieve three-dimensional effects on a two-dimensional piece of paper. Now, of course, I could keep going with this, and I could pull certain branches further forward and push others behind, as I would do if I was doing a studio painting. I can put shadows across trunks in certain places. So here, for example, then that branch there, it might be casting a shadow on this part of the tree here. Again, same thing here. This one's in front of this branch here, so again there might be a bit of shadow there, but you have to be careful doing this because it can start to look a bit too fiddly if you're not careful. But just look out for things like that, because again it helps you to define the structure within an area like this that's quite wooded. There's a lot of trees there. Oh, hang on a minute. Almost completely ruined. Forgot to put a fence post there. Dear, oh dear. There we go. Knew it was missing something. Now, I'm not really going to cover spring trees separately, purely because they are almost identical to the trees that we've painted here. Right at the beginning of spring, when there's just a hint of that lime green that you get on the edge of trees as they're coming into bud, you paint the same thing as this. So the structure's still there, this tree hasn't changed, but instead of your earth colours being used to render this area of broken wash that suggests twigs and leaves and things like that, instead you'll be using colours like cadmium yellow and a cooler blue, perhaps like cobalt blue, and maybe a little bit of hooker's green, sap green, viridian, whatever it is that you use to give them a little bit of fizz as well. No harm in that, but essentially you're doing the same thing. I don't use different techniques for painting spring trees, just different colours. I've put a link up here to my tutorial Understanding Colour, and that should give you a bit more information on the colours that I use and the mixes that I like, and how I like to operate with my 3 primaries, a warm version of each, a cool version of each. You might find that helpful too, but that's essentially it with spring trees. Just change up the colour. Rely less on the earthy colours, so I wouldn't deploy burnt sienna as much, nor yellow ochre, light red, burnt umber. I'd leave those alone because they don't lend themselves to that sense of freshness that you get in the spring. Now, summer trees are an entirely different matter, and let's have a look at those now, and I'll show you a good way of dealing with those, because they're not easy to paint. I'm far happier painting this type of thing than I am painting summer trees. which is in fact why I don't paint them very often. What I've done is mix up some colour here for a sunlit side of a summer or a bank of summer trees. I've used cadmium yellow and French ultramarine and a little bit of burnt sienna in there as well, just to warm it up, because as the summer goes by in the UK here, the trees just become quite dull and dark green and a little bit sludgy as summer progresses. And they're nice enough, but the biggest problem that you've got by a mile is the density. The amount of leaf cover on deciduous trees turns everywhere into large blocks of dull green, and you've got to cope with that if you're a landscape painter. You can't just go and chop them all down and go, well, actually, I didn't want to paint them, and that landscape doesn't have any anymore, so off we go. No, you've got to deal with these things, so let's find a way of doing it. Now, if you look at some of the images that I've put up on the screen here, you'll see that what I do is try to keep it very, very simple and try not to include too much detail at all. I put colour on the paper largely into areas of highlights and shade, and then I will just pick out a few edges here and there to break up the monotony and the solidity of the trees that are sort of massed together in a great big clump of foliage. So what I tend to do is I tend to work with two brushes, so I don't have to keep cleaning them out to keep these washes reasonably fresh. And I've got light coming in this way here, so let's suggest a tree shape. You can leave a few gaps in the tree, but to be honest, they've started to close up as summer wears on, and they start to become rather dense. Now we go to a dark colour and just drop that in, as I've shown you before, particularly around the bottom of these clumps that are near a sort of break in the foliage. So we've got a cooler colour here. And what I'm going to do, I want to paint two trees next to each other here. And I'm going to go back into the pale green. Let's imagine there's a smaller one on the side here. I'm going to let them run together, but I am going to do something with this in due course. I know that the boundary is roughly here, where that cooler shadow colour is meeting the tree. That's fine. That looks a bit weird. That's better. I'm just going to go to a smaller brush now and drop in some more darks on this side. You can see here, and this is really critical, that I'm working with a lot of wet paint. It's no good sort of troweling this on, wondering why it's drying on you at an alarming rate. Well, the reason is very simple. You just don't have enough wet paint on your brush, or you're living in a humid country. That is entirely feasible too. And those of you that do and have to paint under those conditions, you have my profound commiserations. Okay, I suppose we should put a trunk in somewhere. My sticky mixer's dried up on me. It's got a bit too sticky. So here we go. Again, there's very little of this to do. most of this branch work is just covered by that mass of leaves there. And don't be too simplistic about it. You don't want it to look obvious and unrealistic, but there's probably no more to it than that. This is all looking dense, so there might even be a couple of other ones growing up through here. Use your imagination. Just do what you think looks right as you're painting. I'm not copying anything here, I'm just making this up as I go along. Maybe we can be a little bit more adventurous here. Yeah, that's a nice shape. Do you know what? I said I don't like painting summer trees, but I actually quite like these. They look quite nice. I have surprised myself. There we are. Now let's do what we always should, which is run underneath these, connect them in. And then put in some deep shadow, because you get that in summer. You get strong shadows. And we'll just drop it in underneath the tree here. Imagine it coming this way a little. There we are, good enough. And do you know what? There might even be an opportunity to put a little fence post and a gate in here or something. That'd be rather nice. Maybe they're going way down over the hill like that. And there's another one up here. It's coming towards us. Yeah. I'm just fiddling now. Now, when I was painting this, I mentioned that there's a boundary between this group of trees here and this group of trees here, marked by the change in the shadow colour and the highlight area here. And I deliberately wanted that to be there because one of the things that you can do to help break up the monotony of summer trees and the density of them is to just pick out one or two hard edges, and all of a sudden it gives an area some definition, a little bit of detail, without having to worry about overpainting what is quite a nicely rendered area of trees. Let me show you what I mean. If you have a look at this picture of the cricket pitch, you can see that mass of green trees behind the boundary in the background. But you can pick out a crisp edge in there, and that's what we're trying to achieve. It's something that you'll see also in the painting that I've done of the style. Again, to break up that area that is dense and not particularly interesting, it just adds a little bit of detail, a little bit of visual interest, a little bit of crispness to the edge of the trees. So the way to do it is to get a clean brush and some crystal clear water and just paint an area. It doesn't need to be accurate, but you just need to dab it onto this side of the tree, because I'm going to paint into it. It can't be dirty water because it will leave a slight tide mark when it dries, so you have to be aware of that. Sometimes it's useful just to dab the edge of it a bit of paper towel just to break it up. But on this side it's nice and wet. And now what I want to do is go into that with the shadow colour. I'm putting more shadow on this side. You can see it's soft, it's merging into the water that I've put down on top of what has already dried. And I need to be careful that I don't go over parts that I don't want to be soft edged. And then I'm just progressively darkening this, so we'll get a little bit more yellow ochre, a little bit more ultramarine. And as we come towards the tree on this side, I'm going to start defining the edge. Now that's a hard edge up there, which I don't want, so I'm just going to get a damp brush and sort that out. But now I can come round here and imagine a highlighted side to the edge of the tree. That's a bit too far away actually from the bright green area. And I do this all the time in my paintings where I've got masses of trees together, often in the middle distance, to be fair, but you have to be careful because you don't want too much detail, too many crisp edges in the middle distance, and certainly not in the background. But for an area like this, where these trees are quite prominent, it's perfect. I'm keeping an eye on what's going on down here because I don't want this drying and becoming a hard edge and spoiling what we've got down there already, which looks good. And I can just continue to do a little bit of work on this edge and make it look like that's the edge of that tree on top of this one behind it, and paint a few little gaps negatively. So what I'm doing is I'm creating this paler shape by painting dark shapes over the top. So we've got holes on the edge here. You don't want to overdo this, as is the case pretty much with everything that you do in watercolour, but it's a useful technique to have and allows you just to break up the monotony of that particular shape. I'm not going to do any more than that. I'd probably maybe come over the top or something if I was doing this in a painting, just create a little shape there as well, but I don't need to for the purpose of this exercise. That has all of a sudden broken up that mass of green foliage. It's allowed this tree to sort of stand in front of that one, and it's a useful technique to have in your locker. So that's your biggest problem with summer trees. It's the density, and you need to find ways of breaking that up. A few little gaps here and there are very, very important, and that helps to achieve it. And then picking out an edge like this, painted negatively, that helps too. I mean, you can do it the other way around, of course. You could have painted the darker edge on top of the lighter one, but there's something quite nice about doing it that way. I rather like it. The other thing I should say with regard to summer trees, and this is really important, is you need to get your greens right. It's no good just going, yay, I've got some hooker's green here or sap green. Let's just mix up a nice pool of that and put it on the paper. Because if you do, this is what your tree's going to look like. Not great, right? It's good colour yellow. It's good colour hooker's green. It mixes nicely with other colours, particularly earth colours. But seriously, you don't want to paint a tree looking that colour. And that's pretty much the case for most out of the tube greens. What you need to do is go back to your primaries. I find yellow ochre makes a lovely green mixed with French ultramarine. It does with cobalt blue too. It does with Payne's grey, makes a really nice dark green as well. Raw sienna gives a lovely sunlit quality to green mixed with either of those primaries. Cadmium yellow for the fresher spring greens as well looks great. And I can get pretty much every single green I need from those combinations. And you don't need to resort to squeezing green out of a tube. It just doesn't look right. So just have a play around with your primaries, your yellows, your blues, your earth colours as well, and you'll soon find that you're mixing really, really lovely greens. The final thing I want to show you is how to paint evergreen trees. We don't get so many of them here in the south of England, but as you move further up north, and certainly into Scotland and into Northern Europe, Scandinavia, North America, Canada in particular, they're all over the place. And somebody said, look, it's all very well painting deciduous trees. Would we also be able to have a look at how to paint evergreen trees? Yes, of course. I fear that you may be asking the wrong person, because they are not my forte, just purely because I don't paint them very often. But in many respects, they are very similar to painting summer trees. What I've got here is a mix of French ultramarine and yellow ochre. It's quite cool in terms of the overall hue, which is often the case. And the way I tend to paint them is quickly with a suggestion of the main areas of foliage flicked upwards. And you need to leave gaps as you do with the summer trees. That's important. Otherwise, they just become really, really dense. And this is one of the issues that you have when painting evergreen trees. Again, they are ever so dense. As you come down towards the bottom of the tree, those gaps can get a little bit bigger. And of course, the brush strokes are larger too. Of course, don't forget ones that grow towards you. Well, that's a rough shape. And then while that's still wet, as I do pretty much with all my trees, we'll get a trunk in there. You can see it coming up through here. There'll be the odd branch coming through here too. What you want to do is, while that's still wet, get a much stickier version of that mix, which is the ultramarine and Payne's grey, and start to create a few darker areas on the tree, similar to deciduous trees in that they tend to come at the bottom of gaps in the foliage. Let your brush do the work. Look, it's not the greatest pine tree you're ever going to see, but it kind of does the job. That's how I tend to paint them. And I do them also that way for Scots pines, which again are very similar. And we could use some sunlit edges. Strange thing with Scots pines is that the foliage seems to just be all over the place. It's really haphazard. A lot of it grows down towards the ground, and most of it is around the top of the tree. Then we get brown colour for the trunk. And they're funny, gnarly things. They often look like the wind has had a go at them. And often it has. They're often in fairly isolated places, but you don't tend to get a large branch structure with them. So don't try and overdo that because it won't look right. You quite often get little stunted branches that have been snapped off, making them look quite straggly and ugly, but I love them. I love Scots pines trees. They're wonderful. They have so much character. But then you will get these branches that just fall down. And that's a Scots pine tree as good as. We can do what we did with the other tree as well, which is just drop in some darks. No harm in doing that. And it's a Scots pine tree that's floating in the air. I haven't anchored it to the forest floor, so we must do that. There we are. Now the last thing I want to show you is how we paint evergreen trees in the distance, because they get even more dense as they go further away from you, to the point they're almost entirely a mass of a sort of blue-green colour. And the important thing to do is to paint them in the way that they go. So instead of painting in a circular motion as we do with deciduous trees, if you're painting a stand of or a forest of evergreen trees, paint up like this. Have some variation in there. These are middle distance to background trees. You can extend a couple higher than the others. Sit them down in the landscape. And as that starts to dry up, you can put a little bit of darker colour in there. Again, it just helps to break up the monotony. There you have a distant stand of conifers, pine trees, evergreens. So despite there being a significant difference between evergreen trees, deciduous trees in summer, deciduous trees in spring, autumn and the winter, they still require very, very similar skills. Huge amounts of liquid watery paint, sticky mixes ready to drop in for trunks, shadows, other bits of detail. They require confidence. They require you to be able to see what's going on the paper and respond to it and react and go, oh yeah, okay, I can see that we need to put a little branch in there because that will just make it look better. You also need to be familiar with your subject. You must get outdoors, study them, have a look at them and understand how to paint them.
Well, that's it for the time being, folks. I hope you found that really helpful. I really enjoyed making the tutorial, and I'm always going to jump at any opportunity to paint trees. They make for a wonderful subject. And if you want to be serious about becoming a landscape painter, then it's a subject you are going to have to tackle. And it's a subject you should want to tackle because trees are so useful as objects to help you with your composition, to enable the eye to move around a painting, to achieve that sense of depth that is always difficult when you're translating a three-dimensional subject into a two-dimensional one. Well, thanks for watching. Hope that's helped, and look forward to seeing you next time.